Enter Garuda Linux, a distribution of Linux out of India that runs over Arch with a heavily modified KDE interface and is touted as being the premier gaming interface for Linux. Hold on a second. Do you need Garuda Linux to run games on Linux? The answer to that is no. You can game on any distribution by employing one of three different methods, and I'm going to go through each one of those and show an example. The very first way that you can do this is by playing a native game. This is a game that is targeted specifically at Linux. It has been programmed to run on the Linux operating system, and it is made to work seamlessly with that environment. The next way that you can do this is by using Steam with Proton. Proton is their compatibility layer. This enables you to run any Windows-based game that you have purchased with your Steam account, and by linking it with Proton, it'll run on top of the Linux desktop. I've had a lot of success with this. Your mileage may vary depending on the games you're playing, but for me it works perfectly. Finally, we're going to talk about Wine shells. Wine is not a Windows emulator, but it is a compatibility layer very similar to Proton that enables you to run Windows-based games on top of your Linux desktop. Now, some people use Wine directly, but most people will use a shell like Play on Linux or Lutris. My favorite is Lutris, and I'm going to show examples of that. As an example, let's take a look at my base system. This is a Linux Mint installation, version 22, which is current at this time. And you can see that I'm operating Linux Mint 22 with Cinnamon version 6.2. I've got running an Intel Core i7, and this is approximately 5 or 6 years old with 16 gigs of RAM and total hard drive space of 7 terabytes. Now that includes an external drive that it's reading. I am running an NVIDIA graphics card, and we're operating on X11, not on Wayland. And a quick little glance at NeoFetch will also show you here very similar information. It does tell you that my theme is a Mojave theme, which is kind of like an Apple theme. You can see my toggles are in the upper left corner. But otherwise, this is a base system with 16 gigs of RAM on an i7 computer. So a basic Linux install. And we're going to take a look at gaming on this system. Let's take a look at native gaming on Linux. That is a program that was targeted specific for the Linux operating system. For example, I'm going to use Zontic. This is a first-person shooter game that is also available for Mac and Windows. We're going to just do a simple little demonstration here on the resources that I have, and you can see even with my 5-year-old computer, since this is programmed specifically for Linux, gameplay is going to be rather swift. Now, I'm not a great first-person shooter game player, but you can see that I'm running through things here fairly quickly. Let's see if we can find some of the other players. There's some over there. And as we go through, I'm not the best at finding the action. Of course, it is very early in the morning. There may not be a whole lot of people playing. But as you can see, this is moving quite swiftly, and you can tell that it's a natively programmed game by the way that it reacts and runs on Linux with my very limited resources. And that's what a native game looks like. And you can see I'm not very good at playing first-person shooters. Now let's take a look at Steam's implementation for gaming on Linux. There is a native Steam application for Linux, and this allows you to boot into your Steam user account, and it'll give you your library with a complete list of games. Now, the vast majority of the games I own are actually targeted at Microsoft Windows, but by using Steam's compatibility layer through Proton, you can actually play these games. Now, there's a really old game that I like to play sometimes when I'm just killing time here, that's Sid Meier's Railroad game. And we're going to go into that. And the way that you set this up, this is a Windows-based game, but I am running still on my Linux Mint. If we right-click on this and go to Properties, you're going to go to the Compatibility tab, and you're going to force it to use the Steam Compatibility tool. This is going to engage Proton. So you don't need to do anything else. All of my Windows games have worked by using this method. Now, I understand on some systems it may not be absolute, or there may be conflicts or other issues. But in this particular, all of my games seem to work just fine with this as soon as you click on Proton. And if I hit play here, it's going to launch that game from within Steam. And this is really old, so it's going to be some basic animation for you to look at. And this is a game where you have to run railroad resources between cities from like the late 1800s into the early 1900s. And you can run your railroad trains, and I've always liked it just to kill a little bit of time, but I'm probably dating myself. And you can see I'm going to start a single player game here, and let's go out west. And you'll notice that this is running fairly quickly, even on my system here. And where are we? We're in San Diego, so if you know the geography, we know that Los Angeles is up here somewhere. So just to start our game, we're going to build a railroad up there, and we're going to put a railroad station there, and we're going to get a little train that runs between them, and we'll give it 2 passengers, 1 mail car. We're going to start there, and we're going to take it to Los Angeles, and I tend to play this on a faster speed, and you're going to see that my train starts taking off. And this game will run seamlessly under the Steam Proton interface, and that is the experience that I've had with all of my games, and I've been able to play them. So let's just exit out of here, and I do want to demonstrate one other thing that Steam does have, and that's going to end that game. Down here, Steam does offer native Linux games. This Tropico 6 game, very similar to the Zonix we had, comes in a native Linux form where you do not have to use, if we go to Properties here, Compatibility, we don't have to use any compatibility because this was targeted specifically at Linux. Now, first time here, it's going to load my Vulkan shaders. This was a clean install that I did. And we can go right into Tropico 6, targeted specifically at Linux.
Plans for the wall have been approved. Cuban commandant died.
And these graphics are actually pretty good for the intro here. And this particular game is that you're kind of a Latin American president of an island environment. You have to run the economy, deal with revolutionaries, and whatever. But you can see that this game starts off fairly significantly and is a native Linux game. Let's take a look at the third and final way we're going to view gaming on Linux, and that's by employing Wine. Now, Wine, they don't like to be called a Windows emulator, but essentially it gives you a compatibility layer that allows you to run Windows-based games on top of Linux. And you can do it strictly with Wine, but most people actually use a Wine shell, something like Lutris or Play on Linux. Now, I prefer to use Lutris, which actually gives you a series of different installers. For example, if I wanted to install Blizzard onto my computer, I would type in here Battle.net, and when we select Blizzard, it's going to take you here, and if you click Install, it's going to launch a script that'll put the Blizzard game inside of your Lutris compatibility layer. And there are different ways that you can get Lutris. You can get it directly from the site, lutris.net. You can also get it from the software store, which is what I've done. I've downloaded the Flatpak version of it and put it into my computer that way. So let's go ahead and take a look here. I've installed Blizzard, and I like to play a lot of World of Warcraft, and once it is installed into Lutris, you click here and you click play, and it has automatically configured Wine. It has done all of the heavy lifting for you. Play on Linux is supposed to do the same thing, but I have not had as much success with Play on Linux. We're going to go ahead and launch Battle.net, and you'll see that it brings up the interface screen for all of your different Blizzard games that are present. And you can see this is a fairly new installation. I play World of Warcraft, so we're going to launch it from here. And you can actually see that the game launches fairly quickly for a Windows game running through a compatibility layer on the Linux desktop. So here we go into my version of World of Warcraft, and we're going to go ahead and bring up a character, and we're going to see what they have to say. So again, I'm thinking that this is running at basically the same speed as it does on Windows for my particular computer. Again, remember, 5 years old, 5-year-old graphics card. And you can see that if I go to play, gameplay is actually quite swift. Now, somebody will argue that World of Warcraft is an older game, but still, I think that the graphics and everything that it has given here are fairly significant and actually plays quite well. You can see that the movement is here, and it is totally playable, even with other players or objectives inside the game. It works really, really well. And this is the way that you could employ a Windows-based game inside of Lutris or Play on Linux by using Wine. And if we exit the game, we're right back to our Linux desktop. So let's get back to Garuda Linux, and is there an advantage to running Garuda over the Linux Mint distribution we just saw with gaming options? The biggest advantage is when you install the Garuda Gaming Edition, it comes with a bunch of gaming tools already pre-installed. When you first log in, you come up to this Garuda welcome screen that provides instant access to several different tools that are available to you. Everything from a Garuda assistant that allows you to do some housekeeping chores such as updates and cleanup options, to things where the Garuda Gamer, which actually allows you to install various emulators, games, and the gaming tools. Now, the interesting thing is from here we can see by default, and this is a clean install into a virtual machine, it has already put Steam, Lutris, several different bottles, wines, and a whole mess of gaming needs are already on your system. So it's already set it up for that. You can also see the emulators that are present, and say in our previous example we had used Zonix, and you can see all the check marks here are games that is already installed to this machine. But if we go down and we go to Zonix here, we click on that and the check mark appears, and we hit apply, and the system is going to go ahead and install that game for you from the console. And as you can see, this is the typical type of picture. Now remember that Garuda is a distribution out of India that is an Arch-based system that is running a modified KDE interface. And I'm going to take a look at, while this interface looks a little bit different, you can actually see that it is KDE that is running underneath everything. Now, because we're in a virtual machine, I'm also not going to be able to install my NVIDIA drivers. It's going to install VirtualBox drivers for the video here. But as you can see, this is how easy it is to install one of the games from this list. You don't have to go out and find a terminal command. You don't have to search for it in the software store. You don't have to do anything. The Garuda comes with all the tools that are necessary to install the vast majority of games that you're looking for. by just clicking on the fact that you want the game. So this is going to run through its installation process here. And this is fairly typical of what you're going to see in Garuda for any installation or any type of software update when you're updating your system. I'll let this speed up a bit through this installation process so you don't have to sit and wait through it all. And it's going to ask me to do that. So now our Xonex has installed. And you can also discard or whatever you want to do with these various things here. So that's how easy it is to install a game on Garuda Linux. And if we go back here, you can also see from this welcome screen how much they give you access to immediately from that. But let's take a little tour around here before we try and run that game. When you go in here, in the favorites, you'll see that it actually installs a web browser that's called FireDragon. And again, with this being a virtual machine, it's going to take a second for that to boot up compared to my live installation. And this browser is just slightly altered from what you would expect from Firefox. Let's see if we can go and look at the various versions of Garuda that are available. And you can see that it gives you a list of your minimum requirements. And I will confess that Garuda seems to be a little bit more demanding on resources. Now, this is the version is currently the KDE Dragonized. This is the preferred installation. However, they have one specifically for gaming, which is the one that I'm demonstrating. There is a regular version that is not a gaming install that would be similar to my Linux Mint, but this is the gaming edition that we're reviewing. You can also download a standard Garuda with a GNOME interface instead of a KDE if you're a GNOME fan. They also have a Cinnamon version if you're a Linux Mint person like what I'm running. There's an XFCE if you want a lighter weight front end to your Garuda. So it comes in a variety of flavors here that you can download for this distribution. But again, I'm doing the standard KDE Dragonized Gaming Edition. We're going to close out these tabs and we're going to take a look at our various menus here. This is just typical of KDE, but normally with KDE, this button is in the bottom of the screen, not the top of the screen. And as we go over here, you can see all of the games that have already been installed. And as we go down here, we should now see our Xonex at the bottom. And there it is. Okay. Multimedia files. It already has installed OBS Studio, which is what I use to make my videos. It does not, by default, in the gaming version, install an Office Suite, but you can select it from the software store. Different settings that are here, the system, and all the typical things that you would find on any other Linux distribution. And across the bottom, this brings you back to the welcome screen we have reviewed. The terminal or console, since this is KDE, is interesting. It kind of defaults to NeoFetch demonstration as soon as you open it. As you can see with this Arch system, it is already defaulted to kernel 6.11.4 Zen, which is the very newest version of the kernel. If we open up, just for comparison, my Linux Mint system, you can see that I've just updated it this morning. The latest version of kernel that Linux Mint is using is 6.8. So this is significantly newer kernel. Now, you're going to notice that there are a couple things here that my memory here is much more consumed with the Linux Mint right now because I'm running the virtual machine and I've turned over a significant chunk of memory to the virtual machine, as well as running video recording software. If you look over here, I was surprised to see that out of the 8 gigabytes of RAM that I gave the virtual machine, that in its base, the Garuda is only using 1.8 gigabytes, a lot lighter than I thought it would be, because it does generally require some significant hardware support. You'll see that while my Linux Mint is using NVIDIA drivers, this has to use the VMware because it's in a virtual machine. So let's close that out from my Linux Mint distribution here, and we'll go away from this. This particular icon is for the Fire Dragon again. Dolphin is the default file manager for KDE. You can see it's using these like candy-like icons, very similar to what I have on my Linux Mint. That give it a neat interface here. A system monitor. This tells you everything that your system is doing and how much resources are being consumed. Kind of interesting to look at. And you can see that this, I've given this 4 CPUs. It is using a significant amount of the CPU power that I've given to the virtual machine. Not so much of the memory as we looked at in the previous NeoFetch, and you can see that 23 gigabytes of the 40 gigabytes that I've given the virtual hard drive are being consumed by what's there. If we go to the settings, this is a standard KDE settings screen. Looks just like every other KDE distribution, except the icons are these fluorescent things. If we just look at About, this system, it'll be very similar to what we saw in the NeoFetch, but again, it tells you that we're using the latest kernel and what Qt versions are present, when KDE framework is present, and it gives you all of the information here for the Garuda Linux. But if you go down through all of these, you can set up your default applications, and it tells you everything that's on the system, and this is exactly the same as you would find in any other KDE system. What you can also show is, like, if you want to right click on the desktop, you can change your things like wallpaper and everything here. I tend to use a picture of the day on my regular system that I get from Bing, but this is the default wallpaper that comes with the dragonized view. So that all operates very typical of KDE, except that they've moved the control bar to the top of the screen, modified a little bit, and put these icons at the bottom. This Octopi is actually the software store that runs a little bit different than what I'm used to. I found this a little bit different. Say that I wanted to install an Office suite here and I wanted to put on LibreOffice. It's going to give you a selection of choices of what to install here on the left-hand side, and that you're going to use that to install your various packages. I found this more confusing than actually the game installation screen, but again, I'm not an Arch user, so that is a little bit different. But let's take a look here, and we ran Zonix on my Linux Mint. Let's look for Zonix here, and 2 installations here. See what happens. I'm not sure which one actually launches the game. It looks like this is the appropriate one. Here we're going to go accept. And here we go into, actually in the virtual machine, it's not running that bad. It's notably slower than when I ran it natively, but as you can see, it appears that Garuda has installed this game completely and with a single click where we just selected the game. After we go in here for a second, I do want a couple different things. Let's see how quickly we move from screen to screen. Okay, I'm getting some lag now. But that's probably not due to, yeah, some serious. That's because I'm on a virtual machine and I don't have the NVIDIA drivers. So I would not advise trying to play this on a virtual machine. You can even see that my mouse is jumping all over. If you're going to try, it's obvious that if you're going to try Garuda, you're going to want to do it on a native install, not a virtual machine. I wanted to look here at Lutris just to see if this is a similar installation as to what I had on my Linux Mint. And it is. And suppose we wanted to install my World of Warcraft. What you do here, you wanted to, that's interesting. We're going to search here, and we're going to go to Battle. And this is exactly how it worked on Linux Mint. And you would ask it to install. And I'm not going to do this because, again, we're running in a virtual machine, but this is exactly how you would install Blizzard to a straightforward install. But again, Garuda has installed Lutris for you. You're all set. You're all ready to go and install Windows-based games from this interface from the get-go. You didn't have to go and find Lutris. You didn't have to install it. Everything is right there. Let's take a look at the upper right-hand corner here. See what we have. This is just system notification disk drives. It's just a little bit of maintenance there. Obviously, if you click on the audio buttons, it's going to tell you which microphone to select and how much output. These are very standard things. So all in all, Garuda does look like a very good gaming interface for Linux, with a bunch of pre-installed tools that make it easy for you to find games. Don't judge it based on my virtual install here. I think that if this was on my live machine, the interaction would be very, very quick. So if you want a game on Linux, Garuda Gaming Edition may be the answer for you if you want the least headaches possible. So in conclusion, we've reviewed 3 different ways that you can run games on any distribution of Linux, and we've also done a brief review of Garuda Linux, which is a version of Linux that is targeted specifically at gaming. If you found this video useful, please hit subscribe, and thanks for stopping by.